This is my first video for communication between midwives and students and anyone else who happens to be interested. And my first topic is why I resigned from the Midwifery Advisory Council. First, I want to say that I worked with Vince Marchant, who was an employee of the Business and Professions Committee, whose office was right next to Liz Figueroa's, because Liz Figueroa was chair of the Business and Professions Committee, the Senate Business and Professions Committee. I worked with Vince Marchant between 2004 and 2006 to get a bill passed that would do two things for midwives. It would create an opportunity for us to have an input into the regulation of midwifery, which is what became the Midwifery Advisory Council, and it would create a collection of statistics, the purpose of which was so that the medical board themselves knew what we were doing. What was happening was various members of organized medicine were coming to people like Dr. Fantozzi, I know this because he told me these things, and saying, how come you're letting those midwives kill babies? And, you've got to stop the carnage. Don't you know how many awful outcomes are happening as a result of this bad law? And the medical board would shrug their shoulders and say, we have no idea how many midwives are doing what. We don't know how many of them are providing planned birth care. We don't know how many of those had problematical outcomes or adverse events. We just don't know. The law doesn't let us collect that information, to which I said, we should do something about that. We should be able to get that information so that we knew what the facts were. If it turned out that we had bad numbers, then we would have the information that we needed to change our policies, amend our law in such a way to create different circumstances or different education. And in general, we would be able to do something about it. If it turned out that we had good outcomes, we would be able eventually to go to the legislature and say, look, obstetricians can't and won't provide supervision to us. However, in spite of that, we're having actually very good outcomes, and that is one of the reasons why you should consider it. I have actually even better reasons now, but that's for another tape. So I was involved in getting the Midwifery Advisory Council statute. However, the way it got into statute turned out to not be as favorable to us. It was not what I had intended. I intended it to be a council of licensed midwives and consumers, as opposed to licensed midwives and doctors. So very recently, we finally, after 6 years, have gotten a consumer on the Midwifery Council, but it took a long time, and because the law says that our agenda is set by the medical board, that means we have to go circuitously through them in order to get something on the agenda. And one of the things that they've said could not be on our agenda was physician supervision, that there was no way for us to do anything about that. There was no way for them to do anything about that. It was a legislative issue. That certainly has been one of the background issues. There are some of you midwives who have been on the CA Yahoo Midwives mailing list who probably know a fuller, more detailed story. But in general, let me just say that I didn't retire or resign because I was in any way leaving either the practice of midwifery or the politics of midwifery. I didn't resign because I was in any trouble or there were any problems. However, there were two issues for me that have been present the entire time that I've been involved in the Midwifery Advisory Council. Another is that as an appointed member of the medical board, to be appointed by the medical board, not to the medical board, but by the medical board, to the council, I felt a very strong obligation to represent the medical board equally with any representation of midwives, that I had to take on a conciliatory relationship with the medical board. It was my job to keep everybody happy, to not say anything scandalous or argumentative, and in general to be polite and speak when I was spoken to. All the good girl things, which seems to have worked in many important ways. I'm not at all sorry that we have achieved the goals that we have. The licensed midwifery annual report, while not perfect, it certainly has done a huge made a huge difference from not having any reporting system at all. In any case, so that's one of the issues, is that I think that my ability to be really effective on behalf of midwifery, once contentious circumstances arise, I need to be able to be adversarial to our adversaries, whoever that is, which means not necessarily making nice with organized medicine. The medical board itself has a very kind of conciliatory arrangement with organized medicine because, as you know, the California, almost all of the physicians who are appointed to the California Medical Board are themselves members of the California Medical Association or other organized medicine groups that represent their specialty. And usually the chair of the president of the board is him or herself a doctor. And so obviously there's a lot of feeling that the medical board should be representing the interests of doctors. And that includes how those interests are defined by the CMA, which you probably know is a state chapter of the AMA. And then the county medical societies are basically underneath that. So there's the AMA, there's the CMA state chapter, and then there are all the counties. All of those guys all work together. In any case, I have found that to be that concept of being conciliatory rather than being able, when necessary, to be adversarial. You probably know me well enough by now to know that I'm not generally offensive to people. But sometimes you have to tell the truth, and sometimes people are offended by the truth. They feel themselves to be attacked, even though that wasn't actually your intention. The other issue is the Keene-Bagley Act, more often talked about as the Open Meetings Act, which has a lot of good things about it. It is appropriate for board members, council members, agency staff to not get together in a dark, smoke-filled room and subvert things into whatever they want them to be, rather than what really represents the public interest and the public good. However, there's a lot of disagreement about what that means, and some people actually have defined it as to mean, for example, that members of the council shouldn't post anything to the internet or to the California the CA Yahoo Midwives email group, that would be considered lobbying by the council in some kind of undue influence. I don't agree with that. I believe that the Open Meetings Act, I have read it, describes that something that is an agenda on the board should not be talked about by those members of the board together in such a way that they are now creating a consensus of opinion or coming up with a decision as to how they're going to vote on it. So I believe I have never done that. I have talked to a lot of people about a lot of things, but never relative to coming to a consensus with other members of the Midwifery Advisory Council. So because of that, I've decided that the time is short here. We have to get these bills. ACOG's bill is a one-year bill. The Sunset Review bill, which is called an omnibus bill, is a one-year bill. Both of them have to be passed out of the Assembly, which is the last of the two houses to vote on them, by the 6th of June. And that's not very much time, and I don't believe that we can afford to spend a lot of time worrying about who we can talk to, who I could talk to, what I could say, all of those kinds of things. So that's the reason. So I plan on attending the medical board meetings. I might even in the future reapply to sit on the board if that seemed to be advantageous somehow for midwives. But in the meantime, I do want you to know that my biggest commitment, the thing that drives what I've always been doing, has been consumer-based rather than midwife-based. I want childbearing women, myself having been one at one time, to be able to have to receive normal care for a normal birth. If you're healthy and you don't want interventions, you don't want drugs, you don't want epidurals, you don't want to be induced, you don't want a scheduled cesarean, you should be able to have a physiologically managed childbirth without having to make a choice between either an obstetrician or a midwife, without having to choose between those two categories of caregivers, and without having to choose between home and hospital. That has never been the case in my lifetime. I was born in 1943, which was the height of the knock 'em out, drag 'em out, twilight sleep, general anesthesia. My mother, I was born to a mother who was under those drugs, and under those circumstances a generous episiotomy was performed, and then they used forceps. My mother couldn't, all four of her babies, I of course wasn't cognizant of what happened after my birth, but I watched her after my three siblings' birth. She couldn't sit on her crotch. They did medial laterals, where they went to one side rather than median. And she couldn't sit on her crotch for 2 weeks. She walked around the house carrying a pillow so that she could sit crooked on the couch and crooked in a dining room chair to eat for the 2 weeks after each of her babies was born. I wanted that to not be mandated by the system, to not be forced on us as a system. So I have always looked at midwifery from the standpoint of mothers having access to appropriate care, affordable, cost-effective, unnecessarily medicalized, not medicalized. No unnecessary medicalization of their care. The other thing is that I spent, in addition to my years in the labor and delivery room, I also spent quite a significant amount of time as an ER nurse. And so I know how medical care works in these other venues having to do with sick children, sick adults who are not pregnant, have nothing to do with pregnancy, guys in motorcycle accidents, all the whole spectrum. And it was very clear to me that we have a sickness system, not a healthcare system, and that our system is involved in managing disease, which means that we want to keep you from dying, because if you die, that's a dead end, and immediate dead end to the revenue stream. But we don't necessarily want you to get better, because that's another end to the revenue stream. So we have a really sick system. And I really want to be able to come at the whole issue of the relationship between midwives and physicians. I want to put a different word in it. I want to say the relationship between non-physician primary care practitioners, which would be nurse midwives, nurse practitioners, nurse anesthetists, licensed midwives, and at the moment I can't think of any other category, but that's quite big already. By looking at it from that standpoint, that makes all of those groups, what we're doing is also of benefit to them, which means that they will be part of the constituency for making these changes happen. Otherwise, one risks the fact that they begin to get jealous and think, well, why should you have, a non-exploitive relationship with the medical profession when we're still being, we're still basically in a subservient, exploited and subservient role. So I want to be free even of the concept of that what I primarily am is an advocate for licensed midwifery. I'm not. I'm primarily an advocate for childbearing women to have access to the services such as are provided by licensed midwives. And I also happen to be a licensed midwife, so yes, I want our licensing law to work. I think that's quite enough for today. I will take this up tomorrow with many things. I want you to see this is a book that has all kinds of really good documents that allow you to talk, to say, this is not my opinion, here it is in black and white. I'll read from this tomorrow. I also have, this is the notebook that I put together for Jerry Brown during the time that he was Attorney General, and it pretty much it's a gold mine of all of the history, the legislative history, the political history, all of the things that organized medicine has said that it would like to walk away from and say, oh, no, we didn't ever mean that, but here it is in black and white. In any case, so I will take up tomorrow where I have left off today. Thank you.